Have you ever prepared puzzles for players and they were perplexed, ending the session in sullen silence, or you doling out hints until there was no point in trying to solve the puzzle? Here are 3.75 mistakes to avoid when running puzzles in a D&D game. Now, these aren't necessarily the biggest mistakes or the worst mistakes. These are just my mistakes that I know not to do because I did them and you can learn from. Well, the first one is maybe you're giving the puzzle to the wrong group. I know that I have one group where we have great story-based, role-play heavy campaigns, and when puzzles happen, the game stops. Everyone tries to figure it out, and we get nowhere. Whereas I can take the same puzzles and give them to another group that I run games for, and they're solved almost as soon as they're out of my mouth, almost every time. So maybe your puzzles aren't bad, they're just for a different audience. That problem can sometimes be exacerbated if your session is online. And I would say with online sessions, avoid puzzles like the plague. Prefer instead maybe riddles or something roleplay based that's still a brain teaser, but isn't going to have everyone ignoring each other and trying to work this out on a pencil and paper in their own house far away from each other. Because what happens when you're at a table and you're given a puzzle, people start bouncing ideas off each other, they talk over each other, they're thinking aloud. But online, all of that is a faux pas. You don't want to be talking over each other. You don't want to be talking with someone else's. So really it just turns into stagnant silence as the fun slowly dies. And next, it could be too complicated. If your puzzle has too many moving parts, if the riddle has 3 steps that then have to be put together into a final answer, I've done that. It's just too difficult. Not because it's too difficult, because there's too many things going on. Too many places for them to go, too many possible different combinations. Now, I will add one caveat here. It can make for some of the most rewarding solutions to puzzles, but it also makes for some of the least fun play while it's happening. Case in point, my players were in a tower, and each room, each level of the tower was a different puzzle. And they had 5 elemental puzzles in a row. And then the 6th room, you had to stack 5 discs, 5 colored discs in a certain sequence to get the door to open. And they were given no context other than that. Well, the solution, which it took probably 30 minutes to come to on that one. And it was just 2 tired people and 1 interested person staring at the table. And then finally, it clicked. 30 minutes of boring play and people like starting to fall asleep, thinking maybe it's time for me to go home. And then it clicked for one of my players, for my wife actually. Kudos to her. They had to look at the element of the puzzles in the previous rooms and the order that those rooms were presented in, and then one after the other stack the colored circles to match the element color of the rooms they had gone through before. It was the first one that made them think outside of the room they were in, outside of the puzzle they were doing. It was super rewarding. It was mind-blowing because it changed the entire frame of reference of the puzzles from then on in the dungeon. And it made it all more meta, and it was so cool of a reveal. But if that hadn't happened, or if I had given it to them after many explanations and hint drops, it would have fallen completely dead, and the whole time would have been totally wasted. So there is a double-edged sword with complex riddles and puzzles. They're more rewarding, but they make for unfun play in the meantime. So be careful. Know your group. And one of the ways that you can avoid being too complicated is by making sure your goal is not vague. Put that a different way. one of the mistakes you can make is having your goal or the instructions be vague. If what they're trying to do is vague and that vagueness is not part of the puzzle, then you need to do your part to hint at, to lay the groundwork, to set the scene in such a way that they know they need to turn the statue, not whisper to the statue. That they need to say an answer to the magical door, not do a thing on the magical door. Both I've experienced. But another solution to that exact same problem is don't be too specific with your solution. Because if your solution is like, it has to be, you can't say skull, you have to say skeleton. You can't say head, you have to say cranium. When it's just getting the idea out, if you're so specific as a DM that you can't pivot to something that would have been a better answer or a just as good answer, you can slow things down unnecessarily and take away what would have been a win and make it a defeat. I did that once where a player gave a good enough solution to something and I chose to make them figure out my solution to it. And when I waited, we wound up waiting the rest of the session. And I wound up having to give it to them. And it was a defeated moment for everyone. And if I had just gone with the good enough solution that was presented earlier, we could have continued through the dungeon and had a great night instead of making the solution too specific. Well, that's been 3.75 mistakes to avoid. Remember, make sure you're giving that puzzle to the right group. Maybe simplify it if you're online. Don't be too complicated. Don't be vague with the instruction or the goal. And don't get too specific on them finding your solution to a problem. Well, I've been DM Sleeper, and this has been Campaign Craft. I hope this has helped you craft your campaign.